So, welcome to Ingathering after another strange and epic year. Thank you. I am awed and delighted to see you all. My name is Abby Hafer, and I've been a member of this congregation for some time. Since church has been fundamentally disrupted since the beginning of the pandemic, I want to take a step back and look at where we've been. In other words, what the hell happened? These past few years have been so strange and so challenging. It's like we were summoned on an adventure that we really didn't want to take. We had to leave behind our comfortable world and enter into a strange new one. We had to be without our friends and loved ones. We had to face new and otherworldly challenges alone. Do you see where I'm going with this, folks? Read the script. We've been part of a heroic saga, an epic even, and we didn't even know it. The Lord of the Rings and Star Wars have nothing on us. And yes, those stories were fantasies, and older legends like Homer or from the Bible were nearly all fantasy as well, but they contain the deep wisdom that we are healthier when we see ourselves as part of something that is greater than ourselves. I'll repeat that. We are healthier when we see ourselves as something greater than ourselves. So we've been living in epic times, and we deserve to have an epic tale told about this. It should have heroes and villains, signs and portents, sacrifice, survival, deliverance, saviors, and resurrection. It should have morals and spiritual lessons too. So I'm going to tell that tale right here, right now, today. A 21st century heroic narrative about COVID-19, starring you. Let's get started. Let's begin with the virus itself. In the superheroes universe, this is a great villain. It is genuinely amoral, relentless, and out to get you. It does not care about the suffering it causes. Our ancestors might have thought that this pandemic was sent to us by a supernatural being. Each variety of faith would claim that their supernatural being did this, for reasons that they alone are qualified to explain. We reject this way of thinking because we know better. We know that the virus evolved. It is a product of random mutations of a few strands of viral RNA. It does not have supernatural meaning. But even without the supernatural, we are still in the territory of legends. This is still a mega story. Now, we all know that any good epic has foreshadowing. There are warnings, signs, and portents. And we had those in spades this time. We saw this pandemic coming. Scientists were tracking this disease from afar starting in January of 2020. It was then new and mysterious, but it quickly became clear that the disease is deadly. By the end of February, people all over the world were dying in droves. The writing was on the wall for all to see. In those far-off days of early February 2020, U.S. scientists were alarmed and talking about it. By the end of February, we were screaming about it. We did not need any magical thinking here for our signs and portents. There was a known virus and growing numbers of dead people. Yet at the time, here in the United States, our modern pharaohs and our would-be Roman emperors refused to admit to the signs. Who here remembers the phrase, the lost 6 weeks? One moral here is that it never had to be as bad as it was. We need to do better. When scientists warn us about stuff, we need to listen. Next, heroes and saviors. Every legend needs heroes, and boy, did we have them aplenty. This will take some time because these last few years have been a marvel of heroism. The first hero whom we must recognize is Dr. Li Wenliang, the Chinese doctor who first noticed this strange new virus and warned that it could spiral out of control. He was summoned for a middle-of-the-night reprimand and later required to sign a statement that denounced his warning as an illegal and unfounded rumor. He died of COVID-19 on February 7th, 2020. Further heroes emerged thick and fast, starting with medical personnel around the globe who risked their lives, health, and peace of mind about their families in order to try and save others. U.S. Naval Captain Brett E. Crozier sacrificed his naval career in order to save his sailors on the aircraft carrier the Theodore Roosevelt. His sailors knew him to be their savior, and when the U.S. Navy relieved him of his command, they lined the deck of the ship and shouted his name in unison over and over again as only the military can, and gave him thunderous applause. These things do not happen in ordinary times. These are times for heroes. Other less-sung heroes emerged. Grocery store workers endangered their own lives and health to provide us with the food we need. Boards of health, governors, mayors, select boards, city councils, and health departments took the heat when they closed businesses, libraries, sports, and schools. We owe them our endless thanks for preferring our lives to their popularity. I'm looking at you, Bedford Board of Health members. I see you. I thank you. B's at the back. Hi, B. Meanwhile, educators moved their teaching online starting in the middle of the school year. As an educator, let me tell you that this was like building an airplane while you are flying it. At the same time, essential workers continued to work, providing us with the running water and electricity that we depend on. Did everybody notice that? Police and firefighters risked their lives on our behalves in newer and even more dangerous ways. And meanwhile, armies of home sewers, 3D printers, and other makers of things have made, I tell you, desperately needed medical equipment. They didn't ask for money. They just did their best to fill in for the supplies that were mysteriously and tragically not there when we needed them. And volunteers, organizers, and tinkerers are still doing it. Cheap, do-it-yourself portable air purifiers have been invented during this time, and volunteers, including Girl Scouts, are making them. These simple devices will make it safer for people to gather indoors. We are busy saving each other. All these volunteer armies rock, and they've made life better for all of us. As to other heroes, right here among us, there are parents who simultaneously work from home while seeing to their kids' online educations. Don't let anybody tell you that that wasn't heroic. I see one right over there. There are others here among us. Other people telephoned their elderly relatives and neighbors and went shopping for them. Still others performed the simple but crucial heroic sacrifice of staying in when they wanted to go out. I want to reemphasize this. People who stayed in because it was the right thing to do were making a self-sacrifice. They were not trying to spoil other people's fun. They were making an heroic self-sacrifice. I thank them. We should all thank them. So, oh my gosh, we have had a lot of heroes, including many who are right here among us. And another moral to this story is that these heroes deserve to be recognized and thanked. But an epic needs a story arc, too. As our heroes struggle against impossible odds, we need sagas of their survival and deliverance. And in our struggle for immediate survival, we depended on our heroic doctors, nurses, and grocery store workers. But for deliverance, we needed science. Now, science is an odd character. Science is the one who tells you that poo is a way of figuring out where the next outbreak is going to be. But science gets the job done. Our vaccines were created by science, and the near miraculous speed at which those vaccines were developed was only possible because of the decades of research that had gone before. Our vaccines may only have given us partial deliverance, but there is no doubt that we are better off now than we were. Anytime that you get downhearted, remember that we are no longer using refrigerator trucks as emergency morgues. We've come a long way. Scientists are now working on the next generation of vaccines that we hope will be able to anticipate evolution and address new variants before they hurt us. Meanwhile, completely different research into aerosols and aerosol transmission also kept us much safer than we would have been otherwise, both before and after the availability of vaccines. In fact, the more we learn about aerosols and the more we learn about indoor air quality, the sooner we will be better able to purify our indoor air, and this will give us even more freedom to again be able to gather indoors. This gets back to those portable air purifiers again, and also to reinvigorating our HVAC systems, including here at First Parish. The moral here is that there's a lot we can do to make things better. We are not helpless. Now, since we're at a church, let's make this into a religious epic. Let's talk about death and resurrection. This disease itself has provided plenty of death. Millions have died. And on a more personal level, there are those among us who have died. Many people here probably know someone who died of COVID-19. We need to mourn our losses. We need to acknowledge our trauma. We need to honor those who have passed. But we also need to acknowledge the bloody miracle of resurrection that has been performed by our medical practitioners. We don't need to believe in supernatural intervention to be in awe of the fact that there are people walking around among us who would have died had it not been for these heroes and for the miracles provided by modern medicine. But there's a bigger, even more important resurrection that still needs to be done. It's perhaps the most important resurrection in the history of the world, and it's not what you think. We need a resurrection of science. Science denial must be seen as the Judas Iscariot of our age. Science is being murdered even as it is trying to save us and deliver us. For example, evolution denial has been commonly accepted in our society since the 1980s. Global warming denial has been going on as long as global warming has been reported, and the denial has become more vicious even as predictions have come true. Our society is now at the point where easily observable facts are denied and uncomfortable history is erased. To paraphrase Martin Niemöller, first they came for evolution. But I didn't speak out because I'm not an evolutionary biologist. Next, they came for climate science. But I didn't speak out because climate change is not quite enough of a disaster. Then they came for facts in general, and people finally started to pay attention. But please note that it started when denial of evolution was made socially acceptable. And this virus evolved into being. and science can only be used to save us if we heed its warnings. But I hear you cry, science gets things wrong sometimes, and science is done by some pretty flawed characters as well. Well, yes, like all saviors, science is a flawed character. It is not perfect. Scientists do not always get things right the first time. We slop around. We get things wrong. But science is open to correcting itself. In fact, it will come as no surprise to many of you to hear that scientists are often equipped with healthy egos. But this means that if one scientist can prove that another one is wrong, they'll go for it. And despite, and even because of this human sloppering around and getting things wrong, science can be creative and can figure things out. It is an engine for reliable knowledge that is unequaled. In the past 400 years since modern science was invented, it has changed our world and our prospects beyond all recognition. We need to remember that. Viruses and other ills will come upon us, whether we respect science or not. But we will cope with them infinitely better if we recognize what science can do for us. The moral here is that however imperfect it may be, we need to commit to resurrecting science and to seeing it for the Savior and Deliverer that it really is. That said, although science is a great way of finding things out, in this church and in our lives, we also recognize the need for community. We need to rebuild First Parish and resurrect our community. And this community has gone through some hard times. This community, through a combination of events, including the loss of many beloved staff members and the ongoing disruptions and dismantlings caused by the pandemic, this community has been crushed. Not spiritually, mind you, and certainly not brought to our knees. What I mean is that the way we always did things has been crushed. Our habits and customary ways of doing things, they're gone. If we want them back, we'll have to put them back. But this also means that we can drop them if we want. Right now, more than at any time in our past, we are free to make our future. We will have to lay the foundations for our future selves over and over again. But we have the opportunity to start anew as never before. We'll make mistakes. We'll slop around and get things wrong, but we'll be creative and we'll figure things out. So this epic really has it all. We've had death. We've had destruction. We've had heroism. We've had struggle against impossible odds. And now our heroes are at the time of new beginnings. And by heroes, I mean you. Remember, these are legendary times. You're living it. You're a part of it. And we are responsible for creating it. It's not Adam and Eve. It's not even Adam and Steve. It's all of us, every last one of us, working to create something new and beautiful. And the moral of this story is, I hope you'll join me.